right in the middle of wedding season last year, I decided that I needed a new 70-200mm lens. And which one did I get? I got this one. It is the 70-200 by Canon. It's the f2.8 Z lens. And for its first outing, what did I do? I took it to a Demolition Derby just to test it out in low light situations, and by low light I mean dark, with the Canon R3. So if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Tim. I'm a wedding and lifestyle photographer based in Eastern Ontario. And when I go out to work, I want something to work first time, every time. Reliability is key, which is why I went for one of these lenses. So stay tuned, let's get into it. Before I took out this lens to a wedding, I really wanted to get to know the lens and how it handled. So what better way to do it than take it to a Demolition Derby? My friend had built a car for this Demolition Derby through his own business. I also thought it would be a great night out for the family. And what I really wanted to test out with this new lens was how the autofocus handled in unpredictable action scenarios with fast moving objects. You know, there was dust flying about, there was smoke from the vehicles. The lighting was also particularly bad. It was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. There was the stadium floodlights that illuminated the arena. But apart from that, you know, I was pushing my Canon R3 pretty hard at ISO 30,000 to 40,000. I think I may have rolled off a few pictures at 50,000 because, of course, in those kind of situations, you're shooting at 2.8 wide open with the fast moving action. You know, I'm not typically a sports suit shooter. You know, I do weddings and lifestyle, so my shutter speed will usually be typically lower, but I was shooting at this event, you know, 1/1000th of a second or higher, just to really freeze that action. And the only way I was going to be able to capture that action was by pushing the ISO ridiculously high. But with today's software, you know, that is not a problem. And I've used ISO 30,000 at weddings with the Canon R3 before and not had any issues. So how do I normally set up my camera to shoot a lens like this? Now, I normally have my harness here attached to the bottom of the camera here, because that makes swapping out lenses easy. This lens is light enough that I don't use the tripod foot. And when I was using the Sigma 70-200 2.8 lens for EF mount, I wouldn't use the tripod foot either, because these bodies are magnesium. I'm not worried about hanging the camera from, you know, hanging the lens from the camera like this and using the tripod mount at the bottom for my harness, because when it's dangling, it's upside down. And having it on the camera like this is so much lighter than what I used to have. Now, as you'll see from the footage from the Derby, I did have the lens hood attached, even though, you know, it wasn't sunny. Yeah, I mean, you might get light coming in from the floodlights, but that's not why I had the lens hood on. I always have the lens hood on because I'm not a fan of UV filters. Let's be fair, okay? I know some people use UV filters to protect the lens, and even, you know, I know they can get pretty expensive and you can get some good quality ones. I'm sure you can, but I spent all this money on a lens. I don't want to put a thin piece of glass in between it. You know, I've bought expensive UV filters in the past, and with and without it, I have noticed on that particular lens, I think it was an old 50-1.4 EF mount, I noticed that it made the images soft, and it was a reputable UV filter. You know, it was $300-400 at the time, and we're going back 20 years. Yeah, probably about 20 years. And I found the images were crappy. So, you know, if I wanted to have that lens wide open, I'd have to take the UV filter off. But I don't use UV filters now, so let's get around that, shall we? So in order to protect the end of the lens, I keep the lens hood on, because if I'm in a crowd of people, it reduces the front lens element from being scratched. Now I have like put small marks in some of my lenses, like my 24-70. You know, I'm guilty of it. It gets knocked off something. I try and be careful as I can, but weddings are pretty dynamic, and at the end of the day, if it doesn't affect the image quality, you know, it's a piece of work equipment at the end of the day. If it gets broken, I'll have to buy another one, I guess, or send it off for repair. But anyways, so this is how I set up my camera. It is so much lighter than the last one. Now, as you can see, it is long. I don't have my old 70-200mm anymore to compare the height with them anymore, like how long they are. And I know this lens is a lot longer than the non-Z mount version. But when you have the old one and you extend it out, it goes all the way. It goes a little bit longer than this one. Now, being more compact in the bag, yeah, you have that. But at the end of the day, this one is better. Much, much better. You have a really short zoom throw, which is pretty important in fast moving scenarios like weddings. I will typically use this lens throughout wedding ceremonies, especially outdoor ones. You know, with the flick of a thumb, I can change it. And when I was shooting at the Derby, I was able to get a variety of shots. And if I had the older version and I was zooming in and out with that long zoom throw, the time it takes to change could be a missed shot. Or with the amount of dust that was there, I don't trust those weather seals enough, because it throws the lens so far out of the body. That's a lot of air to move. Now I know my 24-70 does that, but it has a shorter zoom throw. So when you zoom it out, it wouldn't go as far as, say, this one would. So it's pulling and sucking, you know, different amounts of air. And in a really dusty scenario like that, with a zoom lens, you really want something that's internally zooming. So if you were on a shorter focal length in that kind of scenario, the 24-105 2.8 would probably be the better choice than this one. But there you have it. That is how I set up this lens. As you can see, here's the tripod foot. It makes my hairs stand up on the back of my neck when I touch this. I hate it. It feels horrible. God, I don't know why they coated it like that. Some nicer, smoother coating would have been nice. You know, it does mount on the bottom if you have I have it turned around at the moment. I can't touch that anymore. God, that feels horrible. But as you can see, this collar doesn't come off. It also is not clicky. You have to like line it up, I guess, if you're using a monopod. But even still, like, if you're using a monopod, yeah, you can mount this on a monopod. But the weight doesn't really, unless you have a bad injury, I typically wouldn't use it on a monopod, and at weddings I wouldn't use it on a monopod anyways. But that's where it would come in handy, having a monopod, because then you can just rotate it on the collar, and that would make things, you know, a lot quicker. However, it would have been nice if they did put a click in there, just so you could feel it. Maybe they didn't because it's a hybrid lens, but then why would you be going, you know, landscape to vertical in the same shot? You wouldn't. So I just leave it up like this. Can I line it up? There's no line on the dot there. Line it up as best as possible. That's the first time I've moved the collar after all. I took that off as soon as I got it out of the box. I'm like, off it comes, turn the collar around, ready to shoot. I'm just going to interrupt this video for a short moment of your time. Where do you buy your camera equipment from? I buy all my professional grade equipment from Camera Canada, and there's a reason for it. They have a fast and easy to use website. They have plenty of availability of stock, and they keep stuff in stock that I haven't seen anywhere else. Their shipping is also super duper quick, and their customer service over the phone has always been fantastic to me. You can find their link to Camera Canada in the description below. Now back to the video. Let's have a look at some of the features that this lens comes with. So right here on the body of the lens, this lens is available in black or white. I like my telephoto lenses to be white because that's how they were in the past. And I'm like, oh, you know, having one of those white lenses would be super cool. So I chose white. You have at the very top, you have Canon's control ring. Again, like in all my other videos, I don't use this, but it's an option that we have. And then you have a super nice damped focus ring here. It's super smooth. Like, they're all electronically controlled now, but they've done a really good job of making it feel natural, like they used to feel. Except for when you now hit the end of the focus scale, they always used to feel a bit tighter. Now they just perpetually spin. With the R3, I have noticed in the viewfinder, when you put it in manual focus, you will actually see the focus scale between closest focused and infinity. And this is the part that was a big factor for me when choosing this lens, is the zoom throw. Between 200 and 70, it's just a flick of the thumb. You don't have to, what I've seen on a lot of videos about the first version with the externally zooming 70 to 200, was that it took more effort and it was more than just a flick of the thumb to change between 70 and going to 200. Then we have what you can use on any of the older RF mount bodies in video mode is the aperture control ring here, or the iris switch. You have a little iris switch on here, and you can just flick that. Turn the dial here, turn this control ring and adjust the aperture whilst you're filming on the older system bodies, or with the R5 II and the R1, you can actually use this in photo mode. To be honest, I'm not going to use this because I've always used my thumb on their big control dial on the back. I don't feel like I need this. But for those hybrid shooters or people that will use this for filming and they have like a control rig set up, this could be extremely handy. So let's lock that back in automatic. And then you have the tripod collar here. As you can see, I don't use the foot, so I just leave that up and out the way. Right there, I'll lock it into place because I have my camera on a harness attached to the body. So I'm not going to use this foot. Probably never. This is probably going to disappear forever. I don't know. It usually lives in the cabinet behind me. And then on the side here, we have all the little switches. So we have between full and infinity. So we have full for the focal range, and then from 2.5 meters to infinity. To be honest, I'm just going to leave this on full. This lens is so fast. Back in the day, yeah, I would use this switch on my lenses, but not now. And then you have autofocus to manual focus control switch, and then you have your stabilizer on and off. To be honest, I don't know, I'm torn. A lot of my older lenses, I usually just leave the stabilization off because I always maintain the shutter speed high enough or appropriate enough. And then in dark enough situations where the flash is stopping the motion, you don't need stabilization either. It's when you're using fill flash to lift the darkest areas of a room while still relying on the ambient light to fill the majority of the exposure, that's when I'd say that stabilization comes on. So you're using this lens in a wedding ceremony. Inside, people are coming in. You're using flash to lift up the darkest areas of the room. You could be using high-speed sync on the lowest power setting, 1/1/500th of a second, to stop that motion. I'd say in those scenarios, I'd probably leave it on. But to be honest, these lenses are so good now, you can may as well leave it on. But, I've had it on older lenses where it would slow focusing down by having the stabilization on. And then we have the 3 stabilization modes, 1, 2, and 3. 1 being that it stabilizes, the stabilized optical or image stabilization is on all the time. 2 is for panning shots, so it stabilizes in a vertical motion only. And then mode 3, which I think is pretty cool, that I'm going to be using, is when the lens is only stabilizing, so the image stabilizer is only active when you're taking an exposure. So when you're pressing that shutter button down and you're taking exposures or you're taking pictures, that is the only time when the image stabilization is active. That is really cool if you're trying to save power, because the image stabilization is a power drain on the camera's battery, or for, like, say, sports shooters, weddings, where if you're moving the camera around a lot, you'll see the EVF, jitter between exposures, going from one scenario to another. And I think that's going to be pretty cool to be using that now, because this is a new option for me, and not a lot of Canon lenses, the ones that aren't as long in telephoto length, have this option, because bigger lens, more of a battery drain. So these are the functions of this lens. We also included 2 custom function buttons on the side here. They are the same function, so you can't program one to do the other. You can't program one and have the other one do something different. But I think that's cool. I set that up to change between different servo tracking modes. So that's what I personally use that button for. I don't have it going between one shot or servo mode. I just leave my cameras, even my old DSLRs, I just leave them permanently in servo mode, because I don't want to be, have someone walking down an aisle and I press this button or another button on my camera and accidentally switch from one shot to servo. That's like the worst time that could happen. If you accidentally press a button, you don't want that. So I put the way I set up my cameras is so the least could go wrong, the better. This is the lens hood that comes with the lens. The reason why I bring this up is because it's a lot lighter than what I'm used to. It's more malleable plastic. However, it does have some screws in here for durability. It does have a lock switch, because I have had lens hoods wear out and I've had to tape them to the lens whilst I'm working, so I don't repeatedly lose it. It has a nice little window here, so if you have a variable ND filter in there or a circular polarizer, that'd be pretty cool. And one thing I have noticed, like this is the first time I put it in my satchel instead of my rolling suitcase, and it rubbed up against another lens, and literally straight away I marked the lens hood. So I wasn't expecting that, but hey, at the end of the day, it's a work lens for me. It's not going to stay pristine, but still, a little bit more durability on the paint coating would have been nice. I can't stress enough how well this lens handles low light image performance. I found using it at the Derby that the image results were very usable at high ISOs on the Canon R3, and I know the R3 is a spectacular camera when it comes to low light performance. But this lens, in the images, the contrast holds up extremely, extremely well. And I'll show you some of that as well as when photographing wedding ceremonies in the daytime, especially in the harsh light. I have found this lens also to be very, very good. So let's hop in and have a quick look at some examples in Lightroom. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these examples. Here in Lightroom, we have our first image here that I grabbed from a batch of images, because this one particularly was my favorite out of that sequence. I had it on a high shutter speed the whole time. This image itself was taken at 40,000 ISO at 173 millimeters at 2.8 at 1/2000th of a second. As we go in here, look at the contrast here. It holds up extremely well. Now, with the noise control, I applied 25% or 25 numerical value for denoise. I don't often go above 50 depending on the lighting. If the lighting's particularly poor, I'll go to 50, but usually my standard is 25. I usually use a preset for that. And I love the sharpness from this lens too, when zoomed in to 100%. Okay, so here's some action sequence. These pictures are not developed. I'm not a sports photographer, so I always shoot in RAW. That's just the nature of what I do. I'm a wedding photographer, so these pictures are undeveloped. As you can see, as we run through the motion, with lots of background and foreground coming into play. Look at that. It is holding focus very well. There we go. Until these vehicles come all the way into the frame. Now that could be down to the focus settings that I have, as this is now the priority subject within the camera. Again here, holding, as it loads the previews. Again here. Still with this car in the foreground. I'm holding my buddy in his car in focus until he's pretty much completely obscured. Here we go again, and you can see the dust in the air too. Dust and debris. Here we go again. This is another good example. Zooming into 100%. You can see the dust in the air. Bits of debris flying about. Sorry, my computer's loading off these files off an external drive. I did not make smart previews of these files because I only intended to develop a handful. Pretty cool, hey? This is one of my favorite shots that I got of my buddy in the Derby. I think this is a winner shot. As you can see, with a high frame rate of 1/2000th of a second at f2.8 at 108 millimeters at 40,000 ISO. You can really see the dirt and debris flying around. And just look how crisp it is at 100%. I don't often normally zoom in beyond that unless I'm really like doing touch-up work. But let's zoom into 100 just to have a look. I mean 200. We're at 200%. And look at that. My friend there is in focus whilst he's getting smashed from both ends in his car there. And there's like the sequence. Wait for this to load. Look, we have two cars in front. And he is still somewhat in focus there. That would be, I'd say, a tricky situation. Again, another tricky situation for older equipment. I would have found back in the day. You have all the smoke from the vehicles. When this preview loads, it would be soon. We have foreground, background. There's a lot going on within this image. And yet, we have sharp focus on my friend again. This is another shot that I could have developed. I'm been really busy with my own workload, so developing my own personal pictures has really been taking a back seat, where I only develop like a handful of pictures of my own work, my own personal projects. Again, through the smoke and the haze, My friend there, his vehicle is in focus. And you can see there is a lot going on where older equipment or lenses that I've had in the past would have struggled with this kind of scenario. And it really shows how good the autofocus is on this lens and how fast it is, because these are not slow moving subjects. Again, here is another example. My friend's helmet is in focus. There's lots going on that could distract lenses and autofocus systems. You have smoke haze, you have someone in the foreground, you have moving subjects, and this is a moving subject in itself. I like this picture too, although it's not my friend, so I didn't develop it again. However, I like this one. This one's pretty cool. Just needs a bit of straightening and some post-production. Okay, so here's another picture that I gave to my friend. I think this one's pretty cool, as of him climbing out the front windshield of his vehicle. As we can see, zooming into 100%, look at that. The detail that this lens resolves is pretty fantastic. I am very happy with the quality of this lens, and the fact that it's internal zooming. I don't have to worry about all the dust and debris getting into it, and wet weather too, because I'm outside in the elements as a wedding photographer. Sometimes it does rain, and I used my 24-70 in the rain. However, I have like a microfiber cloth, so when I change focal length, I can wipe the barrel dry as best as I can before adjusting my focal length. Where with an internally zooming lens, this one, it's super great. I don't have to worry about that. Right, so what would this review be without some wedding pictures in here? As I am a wedding photographer, I can't just show you pictures of a derby. So let's hop in and check out this wedding ceremony that I was using this 70-200 Z lens at. This was the first wedding that I took it to. It was the following week, I believe, after the derby, possibly. I can't remember. Anyways, they're all around the similar date. Here we go. Yes, this was the first wedding that I took this lens to. I had the derby, I got the lens, went to the derby, and then I had this wedding. Here we go. Nice in focus. Again, in focus. Obviously not the most flattering with the eyes closed and stuff. My job is to weed out the ones that I don't deliver, so these pictures here are undeveloped and not delivered. Again, we have in focus, load, in focus. Again, I could have delivered that one, but I didn't. Here we go, here's a delivered picture. Wonderful. Look at that. Okay, so here's some more tracking shots and images from this lens. For the wedding ceremony, as the bride enters, as you can see, the image quality is superbly sharp at 2.8. And as a wedding photographer, I like, unless it's a group of multiple people, like I usually shoot wide open. You know, if it's a single person, you know, 1.4, 1.2, f1.4, 1.4, 1.8, f2, two people very close together, f2, f2.8 if they're a bit further apart. And then getting into f4, 5.6, 6.3 is getting into like groups of people. So here all these images are shot wide open. Tracking. Still wonderfully in focus. Walking down towards me. And this is one of my delivered pictures. When it loads. I am using smart previews, but now all my catalogs, once I've finished working with them, they are offloaded onto external drive. So I'm loading the catalog and the pictures off the external drive. Whilst I'm working on the pictures, the catalog is on my computer and all the pictures are on an external drive and using smart previews. So that makes it a lot quicker to edit. I don't have to wait for the pictures to load like this. But now we're going back through a back catalogue. Wonderful. I love the colours coming through this lens. I mean, this is fall, so the colours are beautiful and they're popping. Beautiful tones. Absolutely fantastic. Another lovely image here that I chose to deliver to the client. Look how crisp and sharp it is. With the bokeh is very pleasing to the eye. Shallow depth of field at this focal length of 70 millimeters. Another beautiful image here. I just love the colors out of it that you can bring out from the raw files of this lens. Here we have another picture of the groom and the groomsmen at the ceremony site. I just wanted to hop onto this picture and show you just before we move on. I love the colors out of this lens and the resolving detail out of it. Look how sharp. I'm not like, this is really sharp. I used to love my Sigma, 70 to 200 millimeter 2.8 sports edition lens. Like, I loved that lens, and it was sad letting go of it. But this one, it just blows it straight out the water. And back when that lens came out, I believe, gosh, was it 2016? It took a long time to release that lens. And we're 10 years, not even 10 years out from that lens being, I can't believe it's been 10 years. To me, it doesn't feel that long. 2016, oh, that doesn't seem that long ago, but it is. And how far things have come in that amount of time is incredible. So who is this lens for? This lens I would recommend to any working professional looking to upgrade. If they have no problems with the lens they're currently using, then I would keep, if it's a work tool that you're using for work and you can't justify the expense of upgrading yet, then I would hold off until your current lens is no longer suitable for your needs. Like I did, I was working with a lens that was an older version. It was the RF Sigma lens Sport Edition model. But I would recommend this lens hands down to any working professional. So that'd be wedding photographers, event photographers, and sports photographers. They will be using this lens. It's a workhorse lens at the end of the day. If you're going to be out in the elements for extended periods of time, especially with rain, you don't have to worry as much about an as an internal zooming lens as you would with an internal zooming lens. Now, yes, in torrential downpours, you should really cover the lens because they are not IP rated. But, like I've used my equipment in the rain. I just wear a long jacket. I haven't, I'm really bad. I haven't covered my lens, my cameras with, I have a weather thing to put over my cameras, and yet it never seems to come out of my camera bag. I just kind of wear a long coat and the cameras kind of hang out just underneath it, but with where the coat's hanging, the majority of the rain doesn't hit the camera. So that's the way I shoot. Is it the right way? Probably not, but at the end of the day, it's a tool to do a job. They're going to get beaten up. I'm not one of those people that keeps my stuff pristine. Now, I don't go out of my way to intentionally damage my camera. So if I get a scratch, I'm like, bother. I've scratched my camera. But, at the end of the day, it's not a deal breaker. The thing still works. So it's there to make money and pay the bills. So is this a lens worth that upgrade? And I say 100% yes. Like I just said before, I love it. It's much lighter than all my other 70-200s that I've used in the past. It is a native RF mount to the RF body, and that brings all the RF benefits. It has those extra 2 pins on the lens mount, so you have faster autofocus, and it has the 2 VCM motors inside, so the autofocus drives super quick, it is super accurate, and it stays locked on. So, am I impressed? Yes. It has a thumbs up from me. So, Thank you very much, guys, for watching this video. I hope you all subscribe, like, and comment. We'll see you all next time.